Trial Lawyers University, where the Titans come to train. Produced and powered by LawPods.
All right, everybody, we got Kimball Jones, and we have but before we get started with Kimball and what he's been doing for the last year, Nick Rowley's joining us from Costa Rica, because Nick finds passion projects. The last one was, well, the one that I remember was, modifying the med-mal laws in California to make them a little bit more just for victims of medical malpractice. But now we got a new fight on our hands in California with a company you might have heard of called Uber. So Nick, first of all, Nick, hey, man, great year in 2025 for you. Obviously, 11 verdicts, fucking crushed it. So that's what the game's about, leading by example. So mazel tov.
Excellent.
But business at hand, our future's at stake. This is what they call one of those moments that is, well, it would be the end of times in California and probably the country if this got through. So what is Uber trying to do to destroy our civil justice system?
What Uber is trying to do is destroy the contingency fee system. And we know as lawyers that represent people on contingency that 99% of the people we represent could never afford to hire us. Regular, ordinary working people can't afford to get a lawyer who has the skills and the capabilities and the resources to stand up against the corporate giants and the big firms out there. They just can't, especially when they're injured, especially when you've had the matriarch or the patriarch of the family get killed. They can't afford to get the help that they need. That's why the contingency fee system exists, so that if we win, we get paid. If we don't win, we never get paid. Uber wants to knock that out. So they filed a ballot measure in California. The thing they did before the ballot measure is they filed a bunch of lawsuits against certain law firms, and they've been doing it not just in California, but around the country. So they're trying this out in California because if it works in the most liberal state in the United States, most liberal state in America, then they're going to say, look, they're going to talk to legislators, lawmakers in other states and try to get the same law passed and run ballot measures in other states. Because if they can accomplish it in California, there's going to be a wave of tort reform everywhere. Uber's biggest shareholder is Saudi Arabia. It's a mega rich billion-dollar corporation that doesn't give a fuck about its drivers, about its customers, about any of us. It cares about money. And in 2026, Uber has announced that it's going to unleash a whole bunch of driverless cars in California. Uber's driverless cars, they tried this in Arizona. We've got a video of one of Uber's driverless cars, robotic cars, killing someone. So what Uber really wants is a license to kill. And they've got a good narrative. They really do. It's a strong narrative. Greedy lawyers, right? That resonates with people. Lawyers taking advantage of clients. Lawyers, setting people up for medical treatment that they don't need. Does that happen? Maybe every once in a while it does. But that's a very, very small minority. Just like there's medical malpractice out there. There are people that die because of it, but most healthcare providers are pretty darn great. And we know when you have these laws that get passed that limit access to a medical malpractice lawsuit, that people can't get lawyers. They can't get representation. And the result of that is there are more accidents, more injuries, more deaths, and because there's no accountability. So if we don't fight this, and this is going to be a $150, $200 million battle, if we don't fight it in California, it's going to spread throughout the country. And what we do and what we believe in and access to civil justice will be dead, will be effectively ruined. That's what Uber's trying to do. So in the past less than 3 months, we've raised $46 million. And we're trying to raise an additional $4 million before the end of the year to meet our goal. And then next year, we need to raise $100 million by the end of September. That's the goal. And if we do that, I guarantee you that we will win. Absolutely guarantee you. There's no way Uber's gonna beat us, but we need the money to fight them. If we come up with 150 million and they come up with $1 billion, we'll still beat them, because at some point their messaging just gets too saturated and it'll start to backfire. So the title and summary that Uber got, we worked really hard to make sure that the state of California, that the Attorney General, the AG, knew what Uber was really trying to do, and really good hard work by the folks at CAOC, a number of us, made sure that that title and summary really exposes Uber for what it's really trying to do. The title and summary sucks for Uber. It's great for us. We have 3 ballot measures that we've filed. One is a constitutional amendment to make sure that people have the freedom and the right to choose the lawyer of their choice and to contract with their lawyer without interference from corporations or the government. That polls really, really well, like above 80%. So we're going to take that to the ballot. So if we work out a deal where we withdraw the 2 ballot measures that we filed against Uber that will seriously hurt Uber, and they withdraw theirs, we're still going to go to the ballot with the right to choose and the freedom to contract with your lawyer without governmental or corporate interference. And we'll win that at the ballot and put an end to this forever. We won't ever have to worry about these fee caps initiatives again that are going to, strip people from having access to civil justice. So that's what we're doing. We need help. We need people's time. We need your attention. Most importantly, we need your money.
Along the lines of money, so I teach these boot camps on performance skills, and sometimes with other people. So Kimball and I are teaching one March 3rd through 7th in Las Vegas. But before that, we're going to do one out in Big Sky, Montana at your Big Easy Lodge. And so I've never been there. So why don't you give folks, and I'll talk about, what we're going to teach there in a moment, but why don't you give folks an idea what the Big Easy Lodge is all about, since you spent some time there.
Yeah. Every room is 5-star. It's absolutely beautiful. It's on 60 acres that connects to the rest of my properties for a total of 321 acres that you have access to. You'll be able to ski out of Spanish Peaks as my guest, which is pretty freaking great. The skiing in Montana is the best in the country, if not the world. And you'll just have a beautiful, beautiful place to stay. It'll blow your fucking minds.
All right. Well, and then, because I'm working on getting the registration will be up. If it's not up today, it'll be up by today or tomorrow, so that people can pay their tuition directly to the CAOC. So nobody has to concern. Everybody will know that 100% of the money that they give will go to this cause to save our civil justice system and beat Uber. And so that's what we're going to do. And then we're going to do it with Kimball, with Nick, at Nick's place. But I got
if I'm there, there's a good chance I will be. Even if I come in for the weekend, I'll come help.
Come stop, help, say hello. All right, Nick, thanks for joining us. Enjoy
Thanks,
your time
guys.
in Costa Rica, and
All
we're going
right.
to get back at it. Have an
Keep
awesome
slaying
day.
it.
All right. We got Kimball Jones with us today. Kimball, you're in Las Vegas, I assume?
I am, yep, in my office.
All right. Well, I'm in my second office in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, because we just finished the first coaches training boot camp. As you know, we're doing all these programs this year and the trial skills training and stuff. And right now there's only 3 people that could teach it, but the greatest, but we just did this program for 1 week from the 15th to the 22nd of December. It was so great. It was at the Pueblo Bonito Sunset Beach, and, people came from around the country. We had about 25 people in small groups of 5. And it was like the refinement of what every time I teach, every time we practice, I feel like we just get a little bit better. So we are getting really dialed in for 2026. Just want everybody to know that in case anybody's thinking this is Trojan horse. This is not your father's Trojan horse. This is the Trial Skills Boot Camp. Just saying for the record. And so today Kimball and I, we're going to kind of just give people an overview of what this program is going to be about. So Kimball has had, I think, 6 jury trials since we spoke last in the last year. And so it's those 6 jury trials. So we're going to go over the 6 jury trials, but also what we're going to be teaching in Huntington, which Kimball's going to be teaching in Huntington Beach, June 3rd through 6th at TLU Beach. And finally, Kimball and I are doing a boot camp together in Las Vegas at my place, which is hopefully be done with its remodeling. It'll be the first job, just getting over some technicalities with this county about combining my condo. So I have a nice big one for training, but we're still working on that. So that's kind of the overview of it all. Oh, and if anybody's interested, right, Alaska, January 8th through 10th is going to be amazing with Alaska Association of Justice. It's basically going to be a 3-day workshop. The first day, I'm going to kind of go over all the trial skills, witness prep and direct, cross-examination, presentation skills, which are opening statement and closing argument, and finally voir dire, or the jury selection skills, because they're all kind of related, but they're all different. And so then we're going to do 2 days of workshops after that in Alaska. So if you like to ski, you can't wait to get out of the house in early January, come visit us at Alyeska. But that's kind of an overview. So Kimball, tell us, kind of give us an overview of the verdicts you've had since we spoke last.
Yeah, I'll tell you, man. I wish I could join you in Alaska. That'd be
Next
we
year.
discussed. Yeah, that's right.
This is like the first run. It was only like a month's notice, so it's not gonna be a lot of notice for people. But there's not a lot of people up there. But those people are salt of the earth, solid people.
Well, and that's some great folks that have come down from there, right? Rick Friedman. I mean, that's where he started out, right? And
That's true.
anyway, so yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, so last time we spoke, I just finished a couple of trials in August of 24, and then I think we did in September. So then I had a trial with my partner Josh in October of 24, and that was the Escobia v. Raspberry case. This was a DUI driver, Dan, that he'd been out all night from about 9 p.m. until 8 a.m. Getting drunk and high. Went from a casino to a strip club to a bar to another bar, and we're not sure where he was going at 8 a.m. in the morning. But he was driving 107 in a 35, and he ran a red light, crashed into the side of a husband and wife on their way to church. The impact was so violent that the vehicle went flying through the air and hit in the side of a transit bus. And so all the cameras went off on the transit bus. So we had the crash actually on video. There were a bunch of people injured in it. And when we got the case, we of course informed the clients of how cases like this go, that there was only $25,50 policy for the at-fault driver, this drunk driver. But when we sent the demand in, to settle on behalf of all defendants. And USAA chose, for whatever reason, to not defend or settle on behalf of the driver. And so they sent in things to settle on behalf of the owner only in terms of the settlement agreement. We ended up going and litigating for a little while against the driver. And then they came in to lift the default, and we ended up having full-blown litigation and trial against the driver in a case that we never should have, frankly, had an opportunity to go to trial, but for USAA committing bad faith and not defending somebody who was their insured. So we ended up having this powerful trial. We ended up doing an offer of judgment to them for $35 million before trial. We felt confident that that was well below the value of the case, and they didn't accept it. So then we went to trial, and we got a verdict of $50 million in compensatory damages and $500 million in punitive damages. So a $550 million verdict. The judge afterwards in post-trial motions reduced it to a judgment of, I think, $220 million. So that was the final judgment. So that case is on appeal, and we're pretty confident that USAA is going to ultimately have to pay the full amount.
TLU Huntington Beach is going to be the greatest event of 2026. There's going to be 4 lecture tracks, 8 workshop tracks with the top trial lawyers in the country. On Tuesday, June 2nd, there's going to be a golf outing, pickleball outing. That night, we're going to have a dinner at the La Rea. We're going to buy it out. Everybody gets a chance to meet each other beforehand. And then during the conference, of course, we do a full breakfast, full lunch, and theme parties every night. This year, we're going to be utilizing the pool area and the restaurant for more of the parties. And we're going to have an adult swim one night, a Satch Oliver party on Friday night, and the last theme party is going to be a 80s Run DMC Adidas jumpsuit. It's going to be the greatest. And last year we had over 800 people. This year it's going to be over 1,000. So if you want to be part of it all and you want to stay at the Paseo Hotel, don't delay, because it sells out fast and then you're going to be in the overflow. Can't wait to see you there. TLU Beach. That's pretty awesome. And so in that one, what do you think was really the biggest drivers? Because one of the things you'll be talking about in Vegas is punitive damages, and you got a $500 million punitive damage verdict. So give us some insights on how you went about getting that.
Yeah.
And
So
don't just say you watch TLU on demand, okay? Because that's
I
usually the
actually was going to say that, Dan. So you don't need to give me any hint, man. No, the reality of the story for punitive damages for me is that in 2023, I had a case where it was my first case that went to trial where punitive damages were a possibility. And we got punitive damages against a surgical group, the employer of a surgeon, for negligent training and supervision. And in that case, we went to punitive damages we got the verdict on like a Thursday evening. Friday morning, we were going to have our punitive damage closing arguments. And so when we did that, I had never done a punitive damage argument before. And I went on TLU On Demand and I found some guys who had presented some information on it, and it was brilliant. And so I took some information from it was an employment case that he explained how he had done punitive damages in that case. And we reapplied it, me and my partner Mark at the time, and we reapplied it to this case and to the case that we have, which was a MedMal case. And we argued the punitive damages, and we got punitive damages in the case. But that opened my eyes to punitive damages and some other breakthroughs I had. So by the time I got to this trial in near the end of 24, I had already now had punitive damages in one other case, an insurance bad faith case where we got $108 million verdict. And then I had this case, and I really knew how to argue punitive damages now. And it's a very, very powerful position that you're in when you have punitive damages. And so I told the jury in this case, we had a $50 million compensatory verdict. And I went in and I made a number of arguments. There's a handful of things that you really need to do that don't take long to make sure you lose no credibility in the punitive damage phase. And that includes telling the jury that your client doesn't deserve the money, that they've already fully compensated the plaintiff, and that this is about sending a message to the defendant and to the community that this kind of behavior won't be tolerated, right? So you need to make the arguments the right way based on the law in your state. But then I said, look, in a case like this, a jury doesn't typically know what the right amount is to award punitive damages. And so typically it would be somewhere between 3 and 10 times the amount of the compensatory damages, but it's a choice for you to make. How reprehensible is the behavior? Do you think this is a 3 times multiplier case, or do you think this is a 10 times multiplier case? And me reviewing it, looking at it, I imagine there's probably some behavior that could be worse, but not much. And so we recommend a 9 times multiplier in this case. So that was the recommendation that we made. The jury came back and awarded 10 times in that particular case. So it was worked out very well and justified, frankly. We have a guy that did some really horrible stuff, and then he didn't take responsibility for what he did. He actually denied that the crash was his fault during his deposition of the case.
And his deposition was from his jail cell because
That's
he'd
right.
been convicted by a jury. And so
Right.
he's serving time. And so what do you think the basis for such an insane position would be? I mean, that just
Yeah.
seems
I mean, I know what
that's
it
a
was.
position so insane. I can't even picture Trump taking that position. That's how
It's
insane. And that's getting insane now.
it's a pretty rough position to take. And I'll tell you my thinking on it. When I looked at what happened here, I got to say, like, he was not, I don't want to be too hard on the attorneys that were representing him, but the man was on an appeal for a sentence of 20 to 40 something years in prison. And he had that ongoing. And so if he testified that it was his fault and such, it could have undermined some of the positions taken on appeal in his criminal case. And he knew that. He was aware of that. And so I think he was afraid to take responsibility for what he had done based on his concern about his appeal. And so it was in that dynamic that that he took the positions. I mean, he took the positions that he took, but it was well, I just think other things could have been done differently if I had been representing this guy, and they made the choices they made. So we were happy with the positions that he chose to take.
Right. But you would never be in a position to represent that guy because then you'd be an insurance company lawyer and you'd be a terrible person with a crappy life in general. Now there's a few exceptions, but
Yeah.
in general.
Yeah,
In
fuck
general.
that job, man. No. I would never fucking do that. I mean, I'm too far in, Dan, and I can't get behind that shit ethically, man. I represent people against powerful companies, and I don't fucking represent powerful companies against people. No fucking way.
All right. All right. So after that, in January of 2025, you had another result that was pretty
Yeah.
solid.
Yeah, this was another great case. My client, Timothy Kuhn, he is a physical therapist, PhD in physical therapy. He's driving down. There's a traffic jam on the interstate. He gets rear-ended at a pretty high rate of speed. Significant damage to his vehicle. He suffers a traumatic brain injury. His face is bleeding at the scene. He's checked out the day of. There's concern that he has a head injury. A week later, he's diagnosed with a TBI. And it impacts his life in a significant way. And we were able to present that to the jury. Now, his insurance company, the at-fault driver, had USAA. and they tendered their policy right off. It was a 5,100 policy. They tendered it and paid it. He also had USAA as his insurance company, and he requested payment from his insurance company. His insurance company lowballs him, literally offers less than the medical bills. So doesn't even offer to pay off the medical bills that he owes related to this, and he has a TBI that is severely impacting his life day to day. And so it was incredible. So we go into the case trying to get USA to just pay the $250,000 policy. They refuse to do it despite our best efforts. In litigation for a year, we send them an offer of judgment just to pay the $250,000. They reject the offer of judgment. At this point, of course, I feel very confident about the case, and I say, fuck those guys. We're taking this case to trial. So my partner Josh and I, we go to trial on this case, and it was an incredibly powerful case. The case went very well. So ended up getting a verdict in the case of $114 million total. $7 million of the verdict came from the injuries he sustained from his brain injury. $7 million came from the suffering that he went through because of the bad faith, the failure to pay his policy. They ended up tendering with no new evidence the $250,000 right before trial. And they tried to do that to act as though they were being reasonable, but they were not being reasonable.
USAA has really been kind to you, Kimball. I need to know. Everybody wants to know. What are you sending them for the holidays? A gift basket, a fruit basket, maybe a bottle of whiskey so they can have a little celebration there, that they've been so kind to the people of Vegas and the Bighorn Law Firm.
Man, I mean, it really is kind of an amazing thing that these insurance companies, my view is they all have a degree of corruption that is just so bad. And I think the public knows it. And USAA used to be so good in my experience, and they just picked the right time to start doing shit the way that everybody else does it, is what it feels like. It kind of lined up perfectly while in the same time frame that I started getting good at what I do, that they decided to try to cheat, some of my clients. And so I've been able to, try to take them to the woodshed on the cheating that they're doing. So gotta
I think
appreciate
you
that.
debate the word trying. I think taking them to the woodshed would be
Yeah.
a more accurate assessment of what's happened between you and USAA. I can't believe they just don't pay every policy that your name is associated to, just out of self-preservation, for God's sakes. It would seem logical.
What's incredible, Dan, I'm genuinely, I expect to have a couple more verdicts that are in the same vein as this with USAA over the next 3 years, probably, because I have other cases now in my firm that, man, it just feels like the bad faith is over the top in multiple cases sometimes. So it's bizarre. I don't know why insurance companies engage in this behavior, except that I guess the truth of the matter is, Dan, that 99.9% of the time, people do not hold them accountable when they engage in this behavior. They just let it go. And they get close to trial, and USA finally makes some offer. And so they just forget that USA has been cheating their client for, the last 3, 4, 5 years, or that any other insurance company is, and then they settle. So yeah, you got to just take them the distance. When they start throwing the money out, say, nah, we're going to make sure that this one goes public, and then you can pay me after.
That's a solid plan, Kimball. Now you had some time off between that one and your next trial that was in September.
Yeah, I will tell you, Dan, I'm going to just mention this case. I had this amazing case in March of 2025 that was supposed to go to trial. And it involved a 13-year-old kid that got misdiagnosed. He had meningitis, and they misdiagnosed him with stomach flu because of some serious corruption, I thought, within the healthcare system. Just this horrible corruption with one of the biggest companies in America. And in that case, we settled it right before trial. The family wanted to settle, and the offer got big enough. But it was a case, it would have been, I think, the largest verdict that I've ever been a part of. And we ended up settling it. But there was a case that I had really ramped up for, and we were ready to go. The opening was basically done, and we ended up settling it. So I had one case that I was right about to go on, but we didn't even get to voir dire. It settled right before. So that case was a really a powerful case. So sometimes you end up having to settle on cases that you've done a lot of work on that you really want to hit, and you don't aren't able to. But after that one, the next time I got a chance to go to trial was in August, and that was a case, Saturne versus Lyft. There was a Lyft driver rear-ended our client as he's driving down the road, and actually he tried to do a U-turn and did a U-turn kind of into our client's vehicle. The
Wait,
defense
this was in California, though. Let's be clear.
it was.
This was not in Vegas. This is your first California
It was, yeah.
visit? All right.
And I did the trial with Maro Barunsuzian, and she is fantastic. She's a trial lawyer. She's done a whole bunch of trials. She brought me in. We became friends, and she asked me if I wanted to do this trial with her. So I did. When I looked at the case, I thought the case was probably a $10 million case, maybe more. We ran data on the case, did big data with John and Alicia Campbell, and it came back and told us that the likely verdict was from 1.1 to 3 million. So a lot less than I expected. Based on just the review of the case, the client had a traumatic brain injury, and so we ended up doing it, and we ended up getting a verdict of 2.4 million, which was right in line with the data. But it was a case where I think about $1 million had been offered to settle it early on by the plaintiff, and Lyft decided they weren't. And it was a case where they took kind of a low impact defense. It wasn't a low impact case. The property damage was at least moderate, but that was the position they took.
Lake Tahoe, February 8th through 15th. It'll be our 5th year in a row at the same location. We got it dialed in. We rent out the 7-bedroom house on the lake. We train for 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the evening, and ski all day. It's great fun, great learning. You're going to work on your trial skills and on your case itself. So join us in Tahoe for the 5th annual TLU Ski Boot Camp. But on that case, Kimball, the injuries, so why do you think that your assessment was off by a few million bucks?
Well, I think my assessment was off because I have had a number of traumatic brain injury cases, and I met this guy and I loved this guy, and Oz Saturne, my client, and I just thought that a jury was going to appreciate what he had been through and what the brain injury was. But the defense in the case, they were able to make it to some degree a minor impact defense based on property damage photos. It didn't look horrible. And the jury and the big data, I mean, the data just said that on average, it just didn't come out as well as I thought it should. And so, but I had already agreed that I was going to try the case, and I really wanted to try a case in California, and I really loved this guy, and I wanted to go fight for him. So we went and did the trial, and we had a great time doing the trial for him, and we got an outcome that was much better than any offer ever made. And so we wanted to hit it bigger, not going to lie. I wanted it to be 10 million plus for this guy. I mean, Oz was just the best ever. But it's 2.4 million was what it said. We were about what we were going to get, 1.1 to 3, and sure enough, it came out that way. But yeah, that one I will say that we did get a little bit of a bad draw in terms of the location and the court where it took place. It ended up being in Norwalk, California. I think if it was in downtown LA, we would have maybe had a little bit of a better venue, but it ended up being not in our control where we ended up doing the trial. We got assigned and we had to go.
Yeah, that's the way it works in California. But this could be the chicken and the egg theory too. Maybe even though you had the mindset, but sometimes because like those big data things, I've seen it work obviously both ways. A lot of people are like, I just need to do big data to get a confidence in the number. But, because like my buddy Craig Peters, he did a civil rights case. The big data set was 300,000 and he got 9 million. So he's like, and so I think it's best to say that big data should be instructive, but not the end all be all of your decision making when it comes to numbers. But informative, but not instructive is what they say. Informative, but be mindful of being too instructive about it.
Yeah, and I've beat the big data numbers in the past a few times, so you definitely can beat them. I will tell you that I thought, based on how the complete destruction of the defense experts went in this case, when we were finished with closing, I thought we were going to get a verdict that was 5 to 15 million. I really did. I thought the jury was going to come back, but it didn't. So that's all I can say. I really did think we were going to get a bigger verdict. And, but 2.4 million was it turned out that the data was right. I was actually, frankly, more optimistic than that, but it is what it is sometimes. But anyway, the client's amazing guy. He's gonna get a lot more money than they offered, and I was proud to represent him, and it was a great experience working with great co-counsel there in California.
What was your big takeaway from that verdict, that trial?
A couple of things. I mean, I think the one thing that was a bad decision in retrospect is I'd say 99% of the time, I mean, almost all the time, I want to put a defense witness on first in the case for two reasons. I want to have it come out of the defense witness's mouth some of the critical framework that I laid down in opening. So that the jury sees right off the bat, no, the stuff that the plaintiff's attorney said, none of that stuff is controversial, and the defense has to agree with it. And then number two, to use that person to destroy the defense opening. They have a whole bunch of lies they always tell in opening, and I like to use a defense witness to just tear that down. In this case, because of some difficulties that we had with scheduling and availability of a couple of witnesses, we went out of order from that, and those witnesses didn't go as well as I hoped it would. I think is the best way to say it, and I think that was, if you pointed to something where I think it could have gone better, I think that's something we could have done better. Now, with that said, 3 days later, we were putting the beat down on some of the defense witnesses it was such a severe beat down that I will say that I became very optimistic. I thought, jury's not going to care about what happened earlier. That beat down was just too complete, you know? So I don't know. It's one of those things where there were a couple of things that I would have done differently if I were to do it again, but some of the parts of the trial went so well. The key defense witness, they had 4 or 5 experts, and they had this neuroradiologist from Stanford, and just one of the most severe guttings of an expert in trial in front of the jury, such that at the end he was talking about, well, the reason why he said stuff that is totally inconsistent with his testimony is because he markets for the hospital and he's trying to draw DTI patients in, and it's just weird shit, and he just walks with like his head down, embarrassed, as fast as he can out of the courtroom. Yeah, so we had some really good moments, but ultimately the verdict came in the range that the data said it would.
What was the expert's name when you put the beat down on it?
Yeah, so I mean, I had like 4 of them, but this guy was Brant Zawadski. Brant Zawadski. Yeah, so a neuroradiologist, last name Brant Zawadski. I think he does a ton of defense work in the Southern California area. So
Well, we'll have to get the transcripts. We'll have to do a case analysis
yeah,
on some of these things, get the transcripts all together, because I know how helpful it is for people to have a transcript of, the beat down, and they could like kind of use it to, again, instruct and inform their own crosses, give a little head start out of the gate. I mean, mostly that really helps a lot when you got that going out of the gate.
yeah.
I hope you're enjoying the chirping birds in the background of Cabo San Lucas, because this bird's being disrespectful to our podcast, but it's important that I'm out here with the beach waves and the vibe, though. This is like, because I wanted to do I was out at Satch's Ranch. I'm like, I'd love to do a program out here. He goes, Dan, your brand is Vegas or beach. My brand is ranch. I'm like, good point. My brand is beach. I'm more of a beach guy than I'm a Vegas guy. So this is the beach background. So Satch, with his wisdom, had a great point there. So
It's working.
it's working. It's working.
Wish I were there, brother.
It's working. And so, because after you did that one, what was your next trial? Because you got some
The
med
next
males in
trial,
the hopper.
yeah, the next trial was just a month later. It was in September. I'm not going to mention the name of the trial just to avoid certain identification. There's a very loose confidentiality. So, but I'm going to say a lot of stuff that I know I can. So this was a case involving a UNLV student, nursing student, who 20 years old, and she was just having lunch with her friends, or having dinner with her friends, and she suffers a stroke. And she immediately stops talking. She just kind of leans over into one of her friends, is unable to communicate. They immediately get a hold of, call 911. The ambulance comes, and then the paramedic completely fails to follow all of their protocols, which are required by the county. These are not just protocols you're allowed to follow if you want to or something. It's not a judgment call. They have a strict set of protocols that you follow. and they just completely ignored them and didn't follow them at all. They delivered her to a hospital. They place her in an ER hallway. She gets placed in hallway number 5. She does get seen by a doctor and nurse pretty quickly, but they also fail to follow the hospital's protocols, and nobody in the hospital does the right thing. And so this poor girl who had a kind of stroke that was very treatable, that almost certainly could have been treated and resulted in minimal to no disability, instead of getting that treatment in the 3 to 4 hour window that she really needed it, she's left in the hallway for 14 hours, just laying there, not getting any meaningful treatment. And then when the next day they realize, oh, this poor girl's had a stroke, they try to do something to fix it, and they end up causing a brain bleed. And so they end up having to, in addition to the brain injury, they end up cutting her skull because they have to reduce the swelling from the brain bleed. And anyway, this poor girl is catastrophically disabled, will never live a normal life. She can walk with a limp, with help. She can talk a little bit, but she has aphasia, so she can rarely even complete a full sentence. And it's catastrophic injuries of this beautiful, just amazing young girl. So basically, she didn't get the care that she needed, suffered catastrophic disability. And we're in the case, and we basically have 2 sets of defendants, the hospital and its doctors and nurses, and then the ambulance company, both of whom completely blew it when it came to caring for this young girl. And we kind of had it as an open possibility to settle with one or the other, but not both. And the ambulance company, at the mediation that we did, came to the mediation and said, well, we think this is the hospital's fault, and we think that our exposure is maybe 100,000 or something. But if you're not willing to take that, we're not really interested. And so we said, great, absolutely, you should keep that opinion, and we'll just go ahead and negotiate with those guys. And you're probably right. We'll probably settle with you after for, whatever. I love it when somebody comes in very confident like that. So we took that approach with them, and a trial starts approaching, and we send them an offer for $15 million about a month out from trial. They send us an offer back for $500,000. We end up settling with the hospital and all of the doctors and such for confidential amounts, but a lot of money. And then we move forward against the ambulance company. Only the trial gets moved by a couple of months, and then we send another offer to them now that the hospital and everybody's out for $20 million. We increase our offer a little bit. We like our case against them, and they respond with an offer of $3 million about a week before trial. We don't respond. We're done negotiating. We know that our case is a very, very good case, and we had run data on it many times. We knew exactly what we were going to do. I had my opening fully prepared, right? We go into trial. During voir dire takes several days. The 4th day of voir dire, we have this moment, Dan, that was just fantastic. We had said we were going to be recommending a verdict of over 100 million, and we had a potential juror there who is asked the question about, do you think how's your feeling about that? What is your feeling about, we're recommending a verdict of so much money? And she said, this girl could have been anything. She could have been anything. We have no idea if she would have been a person that would have made hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. She could have been anything. The potential was there. But now we know she can't be any of those things. We know she will never do those things. So $100 million, that seems reasonable based on that information. And the jury panel pretty much was in agreement with that. And it was this powerful moment. Well, that night they sent us an offer bidding against themselves, offering $14 million. And we got a call from the prior mediator saying, hey, the defense was wondering if they could get you back to the table to negotiate on this. So we started negotiating, and a couple of days later, just before the 6th day, I think, of trial, we ended up settling for a confidential amount that was it was all of the insurance. It was the stack of everything, and they paid all of it. So it was a great case. It was a case that I was very excited to try. Could not have been more lucky to represent just amazing people, and we got enough that our client's going to be cared for and get the care she needs for the rest of her life, and be able to live comfortably, if not accomplishing the goals that she might have. She was a pretty amazing person that had some pretty cool dreams, and at least we were able to do this for her. So that was pretty awesome. So that was in September, and then in November we had some back-to-back trials.
The Dark Arts program with Dave Clark is going to be January 13th through 17th in Las Vegas. Dave Clark is my mentor who taught me about the unconscious mind. And so with Dave, you'll learn about case framing, embedding stories, rhetoric, applying NLP to trial, voir dire techniques. With me, you're going to learn presentation, connection, cross, voir dire skills, performance skills, witness prep, and direct. It's going to be 5 days. And the great part is throughout it, you're working on your case with Dave, with me. It's all a case cost at the end of the day. Dark Arts with Dave Clark, January 13th through 17th, 2026. Of course, well, what was the next one? Because, Cooper versus Health Systems. Was that the next one? See that?
It was,
I
yeah.
can
That
follow
was the
my
next one
outline.
that
Thank
went.
you very much, Kimball. I appreciate it. So what was that case all about?
Yeah, so Cooper versus Valley Health Systems. It was a case that got, I think, severely undervalued by the defense because our client had a very rough history. And I think that Valley Health Systems believed that because our client had a challenging history, that a jury wasn't going to value what they had done to him. And so our client was this gentleman, Billy Cooper. He's a Navy vet, really wonderful guy. But early on in his career in the Navy, he has a significant injury that causes him to be disabled, and he has to be discharged from the Navy. And he develops an alcohol addiction that's pretty bad, that he has for over 40 years, a pretty significant alcohol addiction. And he's very depressed. And in fact, he has attempted suicide multiple times, including twice in May and June of 2021. After the June suicide attempt, he goes to rehab in Kingman, and then he's transferred to a rehab in Las Vegas, Nevada. He's doing awesome in rehab. Everybody loves him. He's this likable, sweet guy, and he is all in, right? And that was the testimony. He was all in, doing what he could to improve where he was. But he ended up getting really sick on the 4th day in rehab, and they send him to the hospital because he has severe abdominal pain and he's kind of spitting up a brown substance. So he goes in to the hospital. They do some checks on him. The medical care was probably fine, and they determine that he's okay to go back. But then they don't call the rehab, which was the normal policy. And they disputed that was the normal policy, but it clearly was. And they don't get him a ride. And so he waits for 2.5 hours in the waiting room after discharge, asking for help getting back to the rehab. And no one gets him help. And he knows the rehab is close because he came by ambulance and he could tell that it was pretty close. So he asks some paramedics that are there, and they kind of give him directions, and he tries to get back on foot. Now, mind you, he has no phone, he has no wallet, and so he's just trying to make it on foot. He gets lost about a block away from the rehab. He passes out in the July 11th heat of Las Vegas, passes out on the sidewalk, and just cooks on the sidewalk for a couple of hours. And by the time they find him, his temperature is 107 degrees, and he has 3rd-degree burns and 2nd-degree burns on his body. He's in a coma for a while. He ends up having to have a bunch of surgeries related to his burns, and then he is diagnosed with dementia 15 months later. So the defense took the position that they did nothing wrong. He was an adult. He made his own choice to leave. They claimed they were trying to get him a ride. They had already ordered a lift and all of these things, and that he just left and they had no right to keep him, was kind of their approach, that he was negligent and it was really his fault for leaving. And that was their position. They also claimed that his dementia had nothing to do with his injuries on the street, that it was because he was a chronic alcoholic with a history of depression and sleep apnea. A combination of those three, they said, was really why he had dementia. And he was 69 at the time of the incident. So at the time of trial, he was 73. And I think the defense just thought that no one would value what they had done to this guy. And Billy was just a really great guy. So we went to trial, and we knew the case was very good. We had done a mediation in December of 2024, where our client was willing to settle at that time for $1.5 million. And we offered $1.5 million at the mediation, and they offered, I think, $300,000 or $400,000 was their top offer. And so then after the mediation, we served an offer of judgment for $1.5 million. They had a couple of weeks to accept that, which they didn't. And at that point, we were ready for trial. And in like the month or two before trial, They came back around to try to negotiate, assuming that we would just take the same offer that we had been willing to take before. They offered 700, we didn't respond. They offered 900, we didn't respond. They offered 1.1, we didn't respond. They offered 1.5, we didn't respond. We went to trial. We knew that we had a good case. And so the verdict ended up being 20.3 million in compensatory damages with a 25% offset for comparative negligence, and then 11 million, 10.95 million for punitive damages. So total verdict was just over 31 million. After the offset, the total verdict goes down to like 26 something, but it's a medical malpractice case. And so there's still some dispute on this issue, but assuming it's found to be medical malpractice, the total verdict will go down to 17 million. But after fees, cost, interest, it's probably going to be a judgment of about 24 million, even in a medical malpractice context. So yeah, so pretty strong case. Our clients are amazing.
So what was your
folks.
big takeaways from that trial? Because I mean, I figure you're learning whether you're winning or you're losing, right? I mean, every day you're rehashing what you did. You're like, fuck, I should have done that differently. Or fuck, I nailed that one. So, that's how you get better.
Oh yeah. I mean, the biggest takeaway on this one is in terms of improvements, I would say putting the timeline out in a more definitive, obvious way for the jury, laying it out in a crystal clear way, I think could have helped us a little bit in this case. The jury took 3 days to deliberate, but check this out, Dan. I talk about big data, and big data has been really, really helpful. But in this case, the big data told me that if I recommended a verdict of 50 million, that was the optimal amount to recommend, that the likely verdict would come back at 20.3 million with a 24% offset. I recommended a verdict of 50 million. It came back at 20.3 million with a 25% offset. And then we got 11 million in punitive damages. So it was right there. Now, I will say this, the data that comes back is only going to be as good as the information you give it, right? And I put so many hours, our team put so many hours into framing that, so it was super clean with the strongest defense possible. And the defense came, they frankly did better than I thought they would do. They really did a good job, I thought, in their defense of the case. But we just had some good issues. We had evidence of them destroying evidence. We had them doctoring records after the fact. There were some strong things that I thought were really, really powerful. But in terms of what I would do differently, I mean, there are arguments I would have made differently in closing. After 3 days of jury deliberations, Dan, I could go through a list of the 10 or 15 things that I wished I had done differently.
That's when you got really time to think about your performance with those juries deliver. Like, fuck, if I just made this, fuck, they wouldn't be there if I just would have said this or that.
Exactly.
Or the other thing.
Oh man.
All right, then you got one
Exactly
more
right.
trial, one more time in the courtroom before up to today. What was that about?
Yeah, so we took that verdict on a Tuesday, and then on the Monday before Thanksgiving, we started another trial. In that case, it's an amazing case. It's Norris versus Paul and Wasson, which is Women Health Associates of Southern Nevada. This is the largest OBGYN group in Nevada by a mile. They're the biggest group. So in that case, the case involved our client, Stacy. She's a 39-year-old who was married, was pregnant, wanted to become pregnant, desperately wanted a baby. She went into the OB, confirmed she was pregnant, and about a week later, she was having some minor issues, so she went into the OB again. And when she goes into the OB, she sees a nurse only, and they do an ultrasound, and the ultrasound says, there's no fetal heartbeat. We think that your baby didn't make it. And she's like, oh, she'd had a miscarriage before. It was very sad. She decides to go home and wait a week. She comes back a week later. They do it again. They say, oh, there's no heartbeat. Sorry, your baby didn't make it. And they're very definitive about it. And so she is very, very sad about it. And she ends up agreeing to undergo an abortion based on the direction and recommendation of her OBGYN. And only after the fact did we learn that he never even reviewed all of the ultrasounds. He didn't review the ultrasound that immediately preceded him recommending an abortion. And they didn't even do the protein testing that they needed to do, which would have confirmed that she was still pregnant. Just insane drive-through medicine here. So she goes in and has an abortion, goes through an abortion procedure, goes back home, and a week later, Dan, she's having a bunch of symptoms still. And she's wondering why, because she just had an abortion. So she goes back in and says, "What's the deal?" Well, this time they do an ultrasound, but what they don't document, Dan, is no fetal heart tones, which they had documented the other times, giving an indication that maybe they were now getting fetal heartbeat, but they don't tell her that. And in fact, what they do instead is they recommend, or they give her a prescription for Cytotec to cause an abortion to occur. So she goes to fill out the prescription, but on the way, she feels that this whole experience has been super sketchy. Something's wrong. She doesn't trust what she has just gone through. So she stops by a hospital here in town, goes into the hospital and says, "I just had an abortion like a week ago, and something's wrong. And I don't trust what my doctors are telling me. I need to be checked out." And so they check her out at the ER, and they find that she is pregnant, that the baby has a heartbeat. So somehow they had totally failed to diagnose an ongoing pregnancy, in fact, ruled out a viable pregnancy, recommended an abortion, did the abortion, and the incompetence was so great that not only did they misdiagnose and recommend an abortion, they did an abortion and somehow didn't kill the baby. And so she has severe trauma related to this because she now thinks, well, is my baby missing a limb? Is my baby damaged because I chose to go through with an abortion? And just this terrible emotional trauma. Her baby ends up being totally healthy, Dan. And her baby is now a 3-year-old little girl, and she is beautiful and wonderful. But we thought they shouldn't be able to get away with this. This needs to be public. So she does a board complaint. The board finds that he committed malpractice in a variety of different ways. And we go forward with the case. We ended up settling after the second day of jury selection. The medical malpractice cap for non-economic damages is $510 this year in Nevada, and we settled for $675, and none of it is confidential. And that was important for the settlement, that we weren't going to do any confidentiality, no non-disparagement, none of that nonsense. We're going to tell the truth about what happened. So that was the case. It was a passion project that I had for years. It's a case that, frankly, we normally would not have taken just based on the economics of medical malpractice, but it was a case that I just wanted to try. When she told me about what happened, I was just so angry. And I also thought, Dan, how in the hell do you ever find out that you get a misdiagnosis of a non-viable pregnancy? Because what they do is they give you a medication to flush it out, or they do an abortion. And so the baby doesn't survive. So the only way that anybody gets caught for this is where you have such an egregious degree of incompetence that they misdiagnose and then, on top of that, fail to kill the baby. It's incredible. So that was the case, and so I was super proud to represent Stacey Norris, my client. She's unbelievable. She's just such a powerful person, so that was that case. We settled it 2 days into voir dire, and so yeah.
Be sure to join us in Winter Park, Colorado, March 14th through 21st. We're going to be doing a ski and trial skills boot camp. So we'll be skiing every day, but in the morning and in the evenings, we'll be working on your trial skills. That means witness prep and direct examination, cross-examination, presentation skills, which are opening statement and closing argument, and of course, jury selection. And remember that your entire tuition will be donated to the fight against Uber in California, because they're trying to destroy our civil justice system. And they're starting with California, but if they win here, your state may be next. So join the fight and come to Winter Park. That's a solid year, Kimball Jones. Well, through these cases, I'm sure you learned a ton and demonstrated some solid case framing skills and put the cases together. And so that leads us to what we're going to be teaching or doing together March 3rd through 7th. I'm stoked about this because, these cases. So I remember, because we were talking recently, you're like, Dan, I think my strongest skill is framing cases, putting the evidence together. And I'm like, I think you're right, because you do a hell of a job. And these are, a variety of different cases, though. You got, medical malpractice, wrongful birth, a car wreck case, multiple car wreck, but insurance bad faith components. So there's all these different framing of different types of cases. And that's really what we're going to be doing in Vegas. at my condo. You live in Vegas too, so of course it makes it extremely convenient for you, and which is important. I'd like to make it. I'm going out to Satch at some point, maybe Satch's Ranch next year to do something with him, but we like to be convenient. So, what is it that you know that people are going to get? Because people are going to come to this, and some of them may be coming because they want to contribute to the initiative to prevent Uber from destroying our civil justice system. But people are putting 5 days in, plus the preparation we're going to talk about, of training and working on their cases. So, what are you going to deliver for them for their investment?
Yeah. Yeah, Dan, and I think it's important to talk about that, right? So this Uber initiative in California is super dangerous. I think that it's dangerous for all of us. I'm in Nevada. I do California cases, but by far mostly what I do is in Nevada and not California. But this is a big deal, and I think it's important for everybody to know that you and I, we're not making a buck off of this. This is something that we're doing, and that anything that people pay is entirely going to that initiative. Anyway, I just think that's a big deal. I think it's super
It
cool
is critical.
that
I mean, it's critical. It's like everybody's, like I look at this thing that's coming up, there's a whole Uber thing, and it's like kind of reminds me of like the pandemic. Like it's an existential moment in our existence, but a chance to stand up and do something. And, I think we all need to look within ourselves and look at whatever abilities and gifts and talents we have and say, okay, how much of that ability can I, reasonably put towards doing something. And I'm in a pretty fortunate position over the last few years of doing stuff that I can, do these boot camps with people like you. And then, we talk, we're going to do the one with Nick Rowley out at Rowley's place at the Big Easy Ranch out, in, February 8th through 15th. And I'm going to get him set up with Panish and Rob Apudi and Randy McGinn and the great trial lawyers, because everybody recognizes the moment. And the moment that, we got to, everybody's busy. Who's not busy? I don't know anybody that's not busy. Not one person have I come across that is like, man, I'm just chilling out every freaking day of my life. No, we're all busy as hell, but there's come moment, we got to work on our game, and, do what we can to defeat this initiative. But we're going to do that for sure. But let's talk about working on our game, though, because that's the part I'm most excited about. Is I personally love teaching and coaching. I love when I get the emails, the text messages, and the phone calls talking about verdicts. This one guy just got an $8.4 million employment verdict, his first employment case, because he was in Huntington Beach last year, and he was hanging out with David D. Robertis for a couple of days and doing some workshops and getting some brilliant ideas and using TLU On Demand. Because I'm like, did you use TLU On Demand? He's like, dude, it's like my mentor. I'm like, on that thing 3 hours a day. That's how I got there. I'm like, okay, good. I just want to make sure. But it is such a great privilege to be in such a position to be able to help so many people. And, and in the program that we do together, you're going to meet, because I know you have this form. I'll put the form that you created up on the website so people can see and have people give the details of their cases. So that way, we know everything, and the whole group knows what the case is about. What happened, what are the damages, what are the defenses, what are the best defense arguments, what are the best plaintiff's arguments. And so that way people, it's not just you and I helping people with their case, but it's a collective group of people there, because we break into small groups of 5 students, and those students stay together. And so you have like a brain trust working on your case with you, which I think is what makes it so unique, because where else are you going to get a group of committed people, because they're committed, because there's 6 weeks of, Zoom preps to get these things, to get people right. For you to get to know the case, for you to get to know the participants and really get your mind wrapped around them. But also it takes time to learn a skill. And that's why we have these Zoom meetups. But now after this last program, I'm so stoked, because people are going to really transform now, because now everybody that's come is going to be paired with somebody. So they're going to have like a training partner. And then one of the instructors is going to take personal responsibility for that student, to making sure that they, that they learn the skills, they get their work done, because it's so easy. People get busy and then they miss meetings and then they get behind and everything. I get everything under the sun of why I can't do it. And it's like, it frustrates the shit out of me, because I'm like, I wish there was a shortcut, but there is a shortcut. You know what the shortcut is, Kimball? What's a two-part? First, you have to know what work to do. because you could be working very hard, but you're working on the wrong thing. And it's like the person that's trying to get in shape and they think doing 30 minutes of Stairmaster is going to get them there, yet they're stuffing McDonald's in their, they're eating lunch at McDonald's afterwards. So, they're just doing part of the work. But there's some programs that, maybe 3 weeks long in the middle of nowhere, which are amazing programs for making new friends and reconnecting with yourself. But there's no skills training because there's no feedback. There's no like, hey, you got to do it. No, it's like whatever you're doing is fine. And that's not the truth. The truth is there has to be feedback. The truth is there is a best practices for cross-examination. There is a best practices for witness prep and direct examination. There is a best practices for presentation skills. And there is a best practices to learn the skills of voir dire. It's one thing to have the script, like the apple pie script from Keith Mitnick or Nick Rowley's brutal honesty. But it's a whole nother thing to actually be able to deliver and to perform. Totally different, different thing. And so that's what we're really going to be combining. And, at this last program, it was like all people who had been before. So it was like a whole new level of performance and seeing stuff. But that's why I'm really stoked about this program. And to work with you because, I've known you for quite a few years now and see you get verdict after verdict, but it's like, man, because I want to that's why I got to move to California because I'm licensed there. I'm not licensed in Nevada. And I got lots of community there and lots of friends that have lots of cases to work on. So I'm super stoked about that. But what kind of case, because you have like I know you're really good at insurance bad faith, but you're really good at a lot of those things. So how are you going to help people with their cases?
Yeah, I mean, a huge part of my success, right, is knowing what cases to take to trial and which ones not, right? So people talk about case selection, and I think that sounds very boring. But if you don't know how to frame the case, you can't really select the right case either. And so you have to understand what is it about how this information is going to be framed so that you can get maximum value on the case. And I've taken that. It's taken me a long time on that to get to where I have that. And I'm still learning, of course, right? But I've been able to see how things have to be framed if you want to get a 7-figure verdict, an 8-figure verdict, a 9-figure verdict, what you have to have, mandatory elements, but also how you have to frame them. So even when it comes to, so we're going to be talking about that, about what you need, how you need to frame it, looking at whatever case type it is. Obviously, bad faith, that's an area where I feel like very few attorneys do it well. And I think that there is a method to doing it very, very well that can be taught. And so that's something. But knowing simple things, for example, you're putting together an opening statement that's going to frame a trial. When you're putting together your opening statement, it's pretty important to know whether you should have a training section early or not, right? When do you know to do that? And kind of understanding what the jury is going to need to know so that they can receive the information, know that you're the credible source, and be ready to kind of proceed to do justice. I don't know. I think that ends up being a super critical component. And I will remind you, Dan, that when I told you that was my strength, I remember you said, "Yeah, no kidding. I watched your closing argument. It certainly is a trial presentation."
That's, I figure once we get around to adding that to your repertoire, it's going to just be like, wow. Then people will say, what happened to Kimball Jones? I mean, he was doing great before, but now it's like, I think we did a little bit of work on a couple of those cases just for a few hours, just light work, just working on things like
Yeah.
but it's so important because like Pash calls me up before his last verdict. He goes, Ambrose, give me one trial pointer, man. And don't tell me to slow down. I got that. Okay, Ambrose? I'm like, okay, Pash, here's your one trial pointer. I said, when you talk to the jury, make eye contact, have a connection with that juror before you start talking, deliver whatever chunk of information you want to deliver to that person, then pause for a moment, disconnect, and find a next juror and make eye contact. And don't talk to jurors who are next to each other. Choose that person. That's pointer one. And pointer number two is don't talk to any juror twice until to all jurors once. No jurors for the third time till all jurors twice. You got to make sure you talk to them all. He's like, all right, Ambrose, I think I can handle it. And then, boom, guy gets he only got a $29 million verdict, but he did have a 34-37 high-low. So you see, even though, his game may have been off a little bit, but it's
Only a $29 million
but
verdict,
the best
right?
part was his high-low. the 34, 37. I go, parents, how'd you negotiate that? He goes, they were terrified of a 9-figure verdict. That's how they got that. I'm like, I bet they were. I want to talk to you now about what we are going to be doing, what you're going to be teaching in Huntington Beach, California, because this conference is the 5th year in a row in Huntington Beach. You missed last year. I think you had a reasonable excuse. You were in trial, I hope. I hope it wasn't a
Oh, dude,
vacation.
Dan, I was there and I did like 3
You see
different
that?
presentations,
I got a
bro.
brain damage. I can't remember shit. You weren't in Vegas. I can't remember. Oh, you were going to miss it, but you at the last minute,
That's
you were
right.
able to things got moved, or that trial got moved, the one that you got that big result on that we couldn't quite. That's what happened. That thing got moved
Right.
so you could make it. I mean, you made it enough time, but we could still adjust the schedule. That's important to have the right, accurate schedule.
Yep.
All right. But last year was awesome, I have to say. What was your favorite parts of last year, other than you speaking? Because that's always my favorite part when I'm speaking at a conference. But what were your favorite parts of the conference?
Oh, Dirk Vanderveer, chatting with him and watching his presentation, but also just talking to him and kind
He's
of
such a G.
just being able to rub shoulders and yeah, he has such brilliant ideas, bouncing things off him. That was definitely a highlight for me. John Romano, having a chance to honestly, again, chat with him. I've seen most of his presentation stuff, but talking to him in depth about it was really useful. So those 2
You know,
things
it's
were
funny
pretty
because
great.
that's one of my favorite things about the beach conference is that even though it's decent size, I mean, last year we had like 820 people, and this year I think it'll be over 1,000. I mean, I'd be shocked if it wasn't based upon like a bunch of variables, but the fact that I didn't do Vegas this year. So a lot of people go to Vegas based upon the fact that, I'm moving to Hermosa Beach. And so I'm going to be having like, lots of get-togethers, lots of, workshops, lots of case workshops, people coming over working on cases, just, during having barbecues, having Sunday football. I mean, it's going to really, because I can't wait, because I know a lot of people in California. I spent 10 years there, and that's like my community.
Right.
And, whereas I never really got really adjusted to Vegas because I'm barely there. I'm on the road 3 weeks a month. And so it's kind of hard to really, get a community built, especially, when you're not there. But but it's sitting around and getting to chat with people, the great trial lawyers, the people that maybe you only see on CBN or heard about, and just to sit down and chat with them. And the vast majority of the great trial lawyers are such kind, genuine people. Now we got our small minority who are, assholes, but most of them are great guys, very down to earth, very cool. Even though like Panish, I just consider to be like, he is the GOAT, when it comes to the results. But as far as a human being goes, like everybody loves Panish because he's such a good, genuine person. He's like, even though he's, like it's hard to even estimate somebody's wealth like that, right? A firm that does $1 billion every quarter. I mean, I don't know what the distribution is, but I'm sure it's pretty solid. I'm sure it's pretty good. But he's such a cool person, and he's so cool to everybody. And I remember, like, even after the first TIU Vegas, he's like, Ambrose, I went around and I talked to every one of your vendors. All right. So I make sure that people feel like, they're getting some business around. I'm like, that's awesome, man. That's just like the thing to do that, because it's important for a conference that, your vendors get attention, that, because you can't run a conference without vendors. It's just that the economics don't work out to put the time in. So,
Yeah. I mean, Brian Panish, yeah, I mean, the guy has been just so unbelievable. I mean, he's one of those guys that he's kind to everybody. Every interaction I've had with him, he was more kind than he needed to be. It was, but you can tell that's just his nature. Just a really impressive person. And by the way, like, it permeates his firm.
yeah.
The folks at his firm, they tend to be that way. I mean, Rahul Ravapudi, just as good of a guy as there is. And, anyway, so yeah, it definitely, I look at him and what he does and how he's done it. Man, anything that he says is golden.
No.
You should take it into
I
consideration.
know, and I'm so looking forward to it too, because like he's got a lot of trials coming up, and like I got to sit in on some of them, and it's really cool to be like in the war room with them back there after trial, before trial, and they're all working like crazy, getting ready just to seeing how like the sausage is made, and it's just fascinating. But this Huntington Beach conference this year, I think it's going to be over 1,000 people. People are like, well, there's only 250 rooms at a hotel. I'm like, I know. That's why there's other hotels nearby. That's why some people have to commute 15 minutes. That is not my fault. If people fail to plan, that is not a Dan Ambrose problem. That is a they problem. Everybody knows the dates. Somebody like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be available. I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you. Make a decision. Get registered. If it doesn't work out, I'll give you back your money. Somebody else will take your room. But you try to come here like a week before or a month before, even people that register in March may not get a room at in the main hotel. It just is what it is. But we're going to be doing a golf outing
Yeah.
this year on Tuesday, June 2nd, pickleball with Supio. My buddy Finch Legal is going to be hosting a dinner party on Tuesday, the night before the conference. So the couple hundred people who are there can all get to know each other so much better, which I think is really critical before the conference. We're going to have 4 lecture tracks. Panish is coming back this year. He unfortunately was on vacation last year, or he was at a wedding in Europe. I'm like, who schedules a wedding in Europe during TLU Beach? He's like, Ambrose is my daughter's best friend. I practically raised her. I had no choice. I'm like, okay, Panish, one excuse, one absence. Don't let it happen again, or you're off the agenda. He's like, all right, I have to lay down the law sometimes. This is the problem. Sometimes you got to be the enforcer at TLU, and so.
Good luck laying down the law with Brian
He's
Panish.
terrified of me. Don't you worry. He's terrified of me. He doesn't know he wants to be ostracized from TLU, but he's such a cool guy. But we're going to have 4 lecture tracks, 8 workshop tracks. Oh, Dave Clark is going to be doing a dark arts boot camp the 5 days beforehand. And I mean, and we're going to have more than.
I'm going to try to make it to that, by the way. I'm going to try to make it to that. That's Dave Clark is a guy that I want to learn more from.
You also have to practice the performance skills if you come to the boot camp. You can't just sit around and do theory, buddy. You have to get up there, and you're going to love it, though. I got it really dialed in. Like,
I know, man. I have all the confidence in the world. I just hate doing it.
Simplified it so much. I mean, I've been teaching people that were unteachable. That's how good I've gotten, Kimball. So I can definitely help a little bit, just 5%. Always do 5% improvement. It's all be 5% improvement.
Hey, I'm with you.
That's what I think. And then, but at TLU Beach, you didn't talk about what you're going to be teaching there, because you got a lot to teach there.
Yeah, so I'm going to be doing. I mean, we're not sure about all the class I'm doing, but I am going to do a training, a small group training on punitive damages, and maybe I'll also do a seminar on punitive damages too.
You're doing an hour lecture on punitive damage. You're doing a workshop where people can bring their cases, and you can help them structure them, put them together for the punitive damages result, and not just getting a result, but getting a impactful result. That's what because that way, when people are working on their cases, that's when, especially when you put together, that's why I love my workshops, because people have to sign up for them. And so they have to, and they're 3 hours. So they have to make a commitment to do them. And then, the instructor has 1 or 2 Zoom meetups with the people ahead of time, and gets to know the people and know their cases. And they can really do some really meaningful work in those, 3 hours. So that I'm stoked about. Yeah. But then you're doing a lecture on the punitive damages. You're doing a 1 hour lecture on bad faith, right? Like what is there about bad faith that people give us some insights on the bad faith?
Yeah, so bad faith is fundamentally, it comes down to the duty of good faith and fair dealing. How the law interprets that from one state to the next is one thing, but talking about strategically the concessions and admissions that you need to get, the evidence you need to get so that you can have a competent case to take to trial. I'm going to walk through what that is, and then I'm going to walk through in trial how you present that case to get a win, first of all, but then also to get the value that you should and the punishment that you should against the insurance company engaged in that kind of behavior. So that's the focus there. And in terms of punitive damages, I think I've had 6 cases where punitive damages that I've been able to keep those on the verdict form going through trial. And on all 6, they ended up being awarded, and I've had 9 figures 3 times on those, and then 8 figures and some other good results. So there's a laying that out. Understand it hasn't been random that the jury has actually awarded the punitive damages, and there's a whole bunch of things that I do, beginning from voir dire through opening, that I think are pretty important. That impact whether you get punitive damages and then the result in punitive damages.
May 19th through 23rd, we'll be doing the Case Story Bootcamp with Eric Oliver in Hermosa Beach, California. Eric will be working with participants and putting their trials together as a story. Myself and my other coaches will be working with you to help you become the greatest storytellers there ever were. We'll be working on presentation skills, which are opening statement and closing argument, cross-examination, witness prep and direct, and of course, jury selection or voir dire. So join us, make your cases worth much more, and remember, your entire tuition will be donated to the fight against Uber, because they're trying to destroy our civil justice system, but we're gonna team up. We're gonna work together to stop them. Right, and then there was a third lecture, and what is that about?
Case framing, just walking through case framing on the big picture and the small picture, the order of how you do things, why it matters, things like that.
All right. And then besides the boot camps we've already talked about, we're doing one March 14th through 21st in Winter Park, Colorado. So that'll be another ski and hangout boot camp and, performance skills. And then Eric Oliver is coming back, and he is doing a program that's going to be May 19th through 23rd. So just a couple weeks before the Huntington Beach conference. So that is what we have laid out right now, but we are going to get the rest of, I'm working on Panish and Ravapudi and Randy McGinn and all these folks, because we're going to be doing them throughout the summer. I'm really looking forward to it all. But before we leave each other, Kimball, guess what I'm going to give you a brief overview of that you don't know. I know, you can't even guess.
I don't know.
No, but actually,
no idea.
Witness prep. So I'm going to give you my brief over, because I've never really talked about the witness prep stuff, but I've been teaching it like crazy because I'm teaching it up in Alaska, but I just taught it out in Milwaukee in for the Wisconsin Association of Justice. I was there a few weeks ago, and then I was in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania for the Northeastern Pennsylvania Association of Justice. So I did both of them are so great, because I did a lecture on one day, and then in Wisconsin I just did 1 day of workshops. We did presentation skills in the morning, witness prep in the afternoon, direct. And then in Pennsylvania, I did the day before the conference, I did cross-examination, 2 different groups the day before. And then the following day after, I did the witness prep and the direct. So it was really cool, but I really worked hard on it. So here it is. This is my insight for you. I almost worked with Gina Correa a little bit with the witnesses on that case, but timing didn't work out. But here's what I've learned about witness preparation. All right. So to be great at witness prep is really challenging, especially the cases you're working, because they're all catastrophic injury cases, right? Every one of them. And when people have suffered catastrophic injury or their family member has, the first thing they try to do is bury it, is to repress it and to stop thinking about it, to stop making every day obsessed about the loss. And eventually, after a year, maybe 2 years, they're able to get there. They're able to smile again. Even though they may be missing their leg or whatever the trauma happened to them, because we adjust, just like people adjust to prison, right? You have to adjust. Nobody just quits, because if you do, you just have to kill yourself. And nobody wants to do that. But the challenge for the trial lawyer is that we come in 2 years later, and now I'm like, Kimball, I need you to take me back, and I need to experience what you experienced. I need to experience the crash. I need to experience the time in the hospital when you thought you're going to die. I need to experience those days and those weeks where you can't sleep and, not being able to hold your child and everything you suffered. I need you to relive it for me, because I need to understand to tell the jury, because that's where the gold is at, because we can't expect them to provide compensation for an experience a pain they can't feel. That's not real to them. It doesn't make sense. But the challenge is that these folks, most of them won't go there. They will not go there. And sometimes they get angry. I've had people get so angry at me. They're like, you know everything about the case. You've read the reports. Why do I have to suffer? Why do I have to go through this again? And that's always the challenge, right? Because they have to. And I've heard so many people say, oh man, my client screwed me. They got on the stand and they just shit the bed. And they were so great in preparation at my office. But man, I'm like, well, did you have them testify in front of a mock jury to see and be cross-examined so they could understand what it was like? No. Okay, well, I worked with them for 10 hours. I'm like, I don't care how long you worked with them for. It's like I studied for the bar for 3 months and I failed. Well, guess what, brother? You studied the wrong way, because or you didn't put enough time in. I don't know, but this is not a matter I worked hard and I tried and it didn't quite work out because that doesn't fly, right? So, so, so for witness prep, I kind of like metaphorically speaking, it's like the what where all this bad stuff happened is a dark, dark room, and you'll be able to have to take them by the hand, lead them into that dark room, sit down, experience, relive it all with them, yet give them the confidence they can get up, walk out, shut that door, and go back to their happy life. That they don't, what they will not get stuck in the darkness. That is a challenge of witness preparation. So to do this, like whenever I used to get brought in a lot to prep people's witnesses, but it was too emotionally draining for me. And I found a different way to make a living. So I don't do it unless I'm working on the case or it's like, I'm consolidating a case. Then I'll do it. Other than that, just doing it by itself is just it's debilitating because you have to experience the pain. You have to go to the darkness or you're not connected with them. And then if you don't feel the pain that they feel, they're like, you don't give a shit. This is just, and you have to connect to it. And so you have to be very empathetic, which, I know is a strong suit of yours. I mean, you just have to do it. Like these people that read these questions on direct and just like read it. I'm like, oh my God, it's just such a bad. So here's the process. So whenever I meet with the person, if you were the client, I'd say, Kimball, my job is help you become the best witness that you can be. So now I've set out the intention. And to do this, what we need to do, then I pretend to have a brain fart. Like, wait, have you ever had somebody tell you a story before? And they're like all excited. And you're kind of like, huh? And they go, I guess you had to be there. Have you had that experience, Kimball? Yes.
Yes.
So what they're saying is they weren't able to communicate the emotion or the excitement of the event. Whereas we all know people, when they start telling the story, their facial expressions change to match the facial expressions of the people in the story. Their hands start moving in perfect timing with the actions of the story. And sometimes their voices even change to mimic or imitate the voice of the people in the story. And, they tend to disappear for 2 or 3 minutes. And when they come back, sometimes they're exhausted. And we're exhausted too, because they went there and we went there with them. Do you know people who tell stories like that, Kimball? Yeah. Well, time out for a second, folks.
Yeah.
Every human being tells stories like that when there are our own stories from our own lives and there is no pressure on us, right? That's why people say, oh, just tell it like you're telling your friend at the bar. Tell it from your unconscious mind. Tell it like you don't care. That's really easy to do when nothing matters. It's a lot tougher to do when all the pressure of the courtroom comes in, right? And so you have to get people prepared. You have to teach people how to transport. And so the process is this. I always have people start out telling me a happy story that predates the crash or the injury. So, but it has to be a happy story of a moment. So it can't be watching my son graduate from high school because that's not a moment. That fucking takes forever. It takes hours for the guy to walk up on stage, right? And there's no whereas great ones are like teaching my child or my son how to ride a bicycle, right? Because when that bicycle balances, it's like, you know what I mean? That's the moment. Or the baseball game when the bases are loaded and there's 2 outs and my son's up to bat and I'm giving him, he can do this and he hits it. He's the hero, right? That's the moment we're talking about. And so it's important that it predates the loss because otherwise everything's shadowed and covered, is like, seen through the lens of the loss and everything's changed. That's why you have to go back before that. And it has to be, so people are like, what kind of story do I need? I'm like, whatever you think about it and your face just smiles because that's them transporting, right? Because they're going back there. So I picked the story and then you got to get the details, the basics of the story. Where did this happen? So, okay, I'm at my house and I'm always in the present tense. And the person's like, I was at my house. I don't tell them to speak in the present tense. So I just keep pushing them into the moment, nudging them. I'm like, okay, you're at your house. Where? About in my driveway. Okay. So, who else is there? Well, my son, he's 5 years old and my daughter's 6 and my wife and she, okay, what color is your son's bike? Okay. What color is your son's hair? What's the weather like that day? So that way they have to focus on the moment, which is really critical that they focus. I need the details of this day so that I can see, so that I can properly direct it. And before I do that though, one of the initial things I do is I have them look around the room that we're in. And I do the same thing. I'm always modeling for the client. Look around. I have them close their eyes and show us what they see so that we can see it too. And then, for example, if they were in like a conference room, they'd be like, okay, there's a whiteboard over here. There's this table, in front of it. There's some windows behind you. Over here, there's a bunch of people sitting, a bunch of chairs. Behind me is the door, da, 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 da. And I'll do the same thing, right? But everything I do is opposite. Then I'll say, Kimball, you know how that whiteboard was to your left? What's to my right? And those folks are to my left, but they're to your right. Well, neither of these things have changed positions, but you and I just have a different perspective on the room. And every story has a perspective. So the only perspective we're looking for is yours. And I do this because by the time they get to a deposition phase, they've learned so much about their case that they didn't know before. And I want to make sure they don't kind of, mix together what they learned from third parties or from reading police reports to what they actually experienced. Because if a defense lawyer catches that, it could be a big credibility hit. And so I do have them do this. I call it like the room exercise. So then I have them, and they start moving their hands. If they don't move their hands, I'm like, can you use your hand to show us, or just show us? As soon as they do, it's like the hands come out, and it's so much easier for them to tell their stories, right? Because they're picturing it in their mind. That's the important. They can picture this room in their mind. But a lot of times they can't picture the story. It's a distant memory. Because then I take my camera and I take a panorama of the room and I show it to them, and I'll let them know. It's like, look, most people look. I said, see this room, this picture. It's a picture of this room, right? They're like, yeah. I said, except this picture is flat, and this room is three-dimensional. It has width, it has length, it has height, it has volume. I said, most people look at memories of their lives as these flat pictures, but we need to take this flat picture and expand it into a three-dimensional hologram. And then you need to step into the hologram and you need to experience the story from there. All right. And so I give them that metaphor. And then I also let them know, I'm going to record your the first two sessions, the one about the happy story and the story of loss. I said, I'm only doing this so I can show it to you, and I can show you when you're transporting and when you're simply remembering. And so that way they don't get all nervous about that. And so then when I get ready, I say, okay, now, Kimball, when we do this, it's sort of like we're making a movie, and you're going to be the star of the movie, and I'm the director of the movie. And the star must listen to the director. There's only one person that can star and direct their own movie and win the Academy Award. And who is that person?
I don't know.
Clint
Tom Hanks?
Eastwood. You could be
Clint
right.
Eastwood,
I always
okay, there
say
you go.
Clint
Yeah.
Eastwood for The Unforgiven. That's the one that sticks out in my mind. And it's good for the story. I said, and you're not Clint Eastwood, and I'm not Clint Eastwood.
Plus, Clint Eastwood's the
What?
best. Plus, he's the
But
best, man.
I
Clint
said, so you're going to be the star, and I'm going to be the director, okay? Because you're not Clint Eastwood, and I'm not Clint Eastwood. So we got to keep our roles separate. And the star must listen to the director. I said, and it's also, I said, you ever see that show Star Trek before? You know that guy Scotty, where he can push a button, and I literally push the button, and a person disappears from one place in time, and they reappear in another place in time, and they get transported? Most people are familiar with that from Star Trek. And I said, that's what we're going to teach you how to do. We're going to teach you how to transport yourself back in time and space so that you can relive the story. And then, in the teaching phase, so that's what I do. Then I have them close their eyes, and I tell them, keep your eyes closed until I tell you to open them. And I'm going to give you instructions throughout, but keep those eyes closed when I'm giving you instructions. And then I tell them, look, take 5 deep breaths. And I start to breathe with them. And I try to get my timing with them. And I say, Kimball, everything we've experienced in our lives is stored in our minds in pictures and images. So when you tell your story, first see the picture or image. And when you can see the image, step into the image and imagine that you're there. Imagine that you're no longer here in this conference room, but you're back there. You're back there on that driveway, and you're seeking, you can see your son's face, and you can hear your wife's voice. You can feel the sun on your skin. I said, you're back there. I said, and none of us are here either, but we're all back there with you, about 10 feet behind you, but you can't see us. And I'm not here. I'm just a voice guiding you. So when you can see the sees and hear the hears and feel the feels, then you can begin your story. Oh, and I always tell the people to begin the story 2 minutes before the event. So that way they're not getting up. I had breakfast that day. I got dressed, all the shit I don't need, right? So we get to the key point. So that way they get to the experience. And so from teaching, there are things to look for when a person is not experiencing it, when they're not transported. And the things are when a person gives context to the story, when they're like, oh, let's say it's a baseball game. And they're like, oh, there's 2 outs. It's the bottom of the 9th. So this out matters the most. There's only 1 out left. And my son has 2 strikes on him. And you only get 3 strikes in baseball. I'm like, yeah, I think we all know that, right? So they're like overly contextualizing the story. That's one way. when they say words that express emotions, like I was really excited, or I was surprised. Because if a person is excited or surprised or happy or sad, we all feel it, right? Nobody ever tells us how they feel except when they're not feeling it, because we read emotions.
Yeah.
And that's like the worst question you could ask somebody on direct examination. The worst is, how did that make you feel? That's the worst. The second worst is, what happened next? Those are two of the worst questions God ever put on earth. Because if you're not feeling it, asking them how they feel isn't going to make anybody else feel it. And the only exception to that is like, when people are like, well, I need it for the record. Then you can say, Kimball, for the record, when you see your leg is missing while you're sitting in that car, how's that make you feel? Like, but it's like saying to the jury, this isn't for you. We know you get it. But this is for these people that are not as bright as, or, connected as you. And maybe they have some black robes on somewhere and they sit on the Supreme Court. But they need the record to be complete. So we're going to get for the record. But that's basically it. And then when they get going, most people are very, so things I look for, are they in the past tense or the present tense? I never tell them to speak in the present tense, because if they speak in the present tense, usually they're not imagining anything. They're just speaking in the present tense. So you get a boring story in the present tense. Whereas I keep forcing them, pushing them to imagine, to picture, to imagine. And so that way they see the images, because nobody can see something that we can't see ourselves. Okay. If we can see it, they can see it. So you must imagine. And that's a difficult thing for a lot of lawyers. And so I put them through this process and I record it. And no matter what they're doing, I would tell them, they're doing great, man. You're doing great. Because I need to boost their confidence. But there's two things that I do to help them get there. The first one is, if I feel that you give it a couple of minutes, if they're not getting there, the nudges, I say, Kimball, freeze time. Okay, freeze time. Now I want you to look around from your left, moving toward your right, and show us what you see so that we can see it too. Just like you showed us this room. And now you'd be like, okay, there's some trees over here, and there's a street down here, and there's houses across the street. And then down further, there's a cul-de-sac. And in my front yards, there's this. And then around the corner's the front door, and my garage is here, and my wife and son are standing over there, and the hill's a little bit sloped. So now I force you to see it in your mind to connect you with the moment. So that helps you get there too. That helps me further orientate and see too. And then if that doesn't get you there, the first time there's dialogue, if you then my son's like, oh my God, Daddy, I can do it. But if they're like, then my son tells me he's, that he can ride and he's excited about it, I'd be like, no. So then I'll say, okay, because we always do this, I call it setting the scene first, but I don't like to do that because at the trial lawyers college, they talk about setting the scene and they give all these stupid details that nobody cares about and it distracts the story. But so I'd call it the room exercise first. But after that, when there's dialogue, I say, Kimball, whenever somebody talks, you have to hear that person's voice in their head, and that's the voice they must use. That's the voice you must use. However they said it then, you must say it now. You must imagine that you are them. And when you can become them, and we can see your face in their face, and we can hear your voice in their voice, then you can tell us what they say. And the exact words are not important, just as long as it's congruent with your memories. Because that way it basically teaches them the role reversal, quote unquote, in like psychodramatic terms. But people do this naturally. When people are relaxed, you talk about this guy comes in, he's like, you see their face. And that's another thing too, that like I look for too, is like, what's the person's emotional state? Because they're talking about, oh, I'm with my 5-year-old son, and like they talk, and I say, what's his name? And his name, oh, he's Aiden. And their face doesn't light up. And they're talking about their little 5-year-old. I'm like, you're just remembering. I'm like, you see Aiden right here. Is Aiden standing right here? Like, oh, their faces start to warm. I'm like, yes, you have to see it.
Yeah.
You have to see it, because if you don't see it, you won't feel it. And if you don't feel it, nobody else will feel it. And so that's the key thing. And then I review the video with them and show them, because people are smarter. So many people are like, oh, my clients are so dumb. They can never. I'm like, dude, can your clients understand English? Okay, do they have the desire to win the case with you? Of course they do. It may take a little more patience on your part. It may take a little more work on your part. But they're the most important witness that gets on that stand. And I know so many people try to resolve their cases, without putting their client on the stand, right? Because they're so terrified of it. And no matter how experienced you are, that's always one of those knuckle gripping moments, right? When your client gets on the stand, I don't care how much work you did, because somebody just put a gun to their head. And now you're going to say, okay, can this person perform? We did all the prep we can do. Can they do it? And, typically the more you prepare them, the more calm they are. Because in my world, the perfect witness isn't thinking. They're not trying, because when people are starting to think, they're starting to manipulate, right? It's like if I said to you, what color is my phone? Well, it's pretty obvious it's black. You don't have to think about it. Because then we go through this process and they're in this endless stream of narrative. But that they now they know how to transport, right? And now they see it. Because right there, I'm gonna say, now we're gonna take your flowing narrative, but we have to break it into chunks for a proper direct examination into a question and answer. I say, because facts of the case are sort of like me and pizza. I love pizza, but if I shove a whole slice in my mouth at once, I'm going to choke on it. The jury wants this information. They want to do the right things, but we got to get them in bite-sized chunks, okay? And they say yes. And I said, now, Kimball, Kimball, anything that I've talked about thus far, because that's the witness prep, that's the overview. It's all on TLU On Demand, though. So if anybody doesn't have TLU On Demand, you want to learn witness prep, shoot me a text or an email, dan@triallawyersuniversity.com or 248-808-3130. I will send you a code for 30 days. You can try it out. It's an app for your phone. You can learn. And if you don't think it's worth it, cancel it. It won't hurt my feelings, but you'll know a lot more about witness prep and direct than you did before when you see the examples. But any questions on the witness prep, Kimball?
No, man, it's fantastic, dude. Yeah. And TLU On Demand's the best.
Thanks, man. I'm working on making it better every day, and I'm rebuilding the site. And so it's even going to be more useful. I hired a super savvy tech guy because, I got to constantly improve the product, make it easier to use. And, but direct examination. So after we do this, I go now we got to transition. So there's only 4 rules of direct examination. Rule number 1, make sure you understand the question. If you don't, ask for clarification. And so during the practice, though, I always ask some ambiguous questions that I know the client can't answer. So that way they have to say, hey, I'm not sure what you mean by that. I'm like, good. I'm glad you felt comfortable stopping me. Because you got to I think it's important to give clients the opportunity to correct you because we're in a power dynamic with them. And, many times they're like, they say that my lawyer says it must be right. No, your lawyer is human. Your lawyer will make mistakes. No matter how hard I try, no matter how I prepare it, I make mistakes. We all make mistakes. But it's important that the client feels comfortable if we do straightening us out. So make sure you understand the question. If you don't, ask for clarification. Then ask yourself, what image must I access in order to answer the question? And I'll actually look at my hand like this, but my eyes are kind of my eyes are in kind of like in my mind's eye. I'm looking at the image. Then while accessing the image, now I'll look directly at my hand, answer the question. When you're done, close the image up and come back to me, and I'll know you're ready for the next question. And if you do this, you will be impenetrable to cross-examination. Because that's what most people fear. It's not you questioning them, it's being attacked, right? I said, for example, if I was to say, Kimball, my phone is green. Isn't that true? What would you say? No, it's green, right? Just true. Look at it.
No,
exactly. And notice your demeanor. You're not being defensive. You're talking to me like I'm confused. Either I'm colorblind or I don't understand the meanings of the words green versus black. Either way, I'm not a bad guy. And that defense lawyer, he's not a bad guy either. He's just confused. And we're going to unconfuse him, okay? And the client's like, yeah, let's unconfuse that guy or that girl. Because they're not bad. They're just confused. We're going to unconfuse them. So, Kimball, that was your 5 to 7 minute tutorial on witness prep and direct. And, we're going to be running workshops like that at Huntington Beach and, workshops on every aspect of what we're teaching here. And if anybody, anyways, that's all I got, Kimball.
It's beautiful.
It's been
all right,
great.
brother. Well, good talking to you, Dan. Thanks for having me on, man. And let's kick some ass. Can't wait to do the.
Is going to be awesome. I'm so I feel I've got, all my moments I feel like, okay, I'm getting ready, man. I've gotten ready. This is my year. So, but you know what, Kimball? Every freaking year, it keeps being my fucking year. I'm like, I'm on a roll, man.
That's right.
And you too. And all
That's right. 2026 is going to be good.
I'm psyched.
Brother.
All right, Kimball. Good catching up. Congrats on the great 2025, but 2026 and beyond. We're getting better, buddy. Take care. I'll see you.
All right. Okay. How you doing? Bye.
Ready to train with the Titans and set records with your verdicts? Register for our live conferences and boot camps at triallawyersuniversity.com. Start getting your reps in before the big event by going to tluondemand.com to gain instant access to live lectures, case analysis, and skills training videos from the trial lawyer champions you love and respect, as well as pleadings, transcripts, PowerPoints, and notes for a roadmap to victory. Join the group that continues to get extraordinary results. Trial Lawyers University, produced and powered by LawPods.